Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger radio show podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. In fact, the name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
It's that badger style.
It's another cracking week on the Cricket Badger radio show podcast. I'm James, and I'll be taking you through this week's show. And our guests this week are James Middlebrook, the former Essex, Yorkshire and Northamptonshire all-rounder, who has made the transition into umpiring. Talk to James about the challenges ahead for him, trying to get through and up the ranks of the umpires list, and look back at his career as well. And also going to be joined by Ali Martin, the Guardian cricket correspondent, who has been out with England this winter down under watching the Ashes series. A look back at the Ashes, about Trevor Bayliss and who might replace him in 2019 as England Test match coach. Split format and Hales and Rashid's decision to shed the red ball and concentrate on white ball cricket for the future. So stay tuned, loads and loads of stuff to come.
It's that badger style.
First of all then, Guardian cricket correspondent Ali Martin. He's been down under this winter watching England in Ashes Test match defeat. I think both me and Ali were positive about England's chances when we last spoke ahead of the tour. Not quite worked out for Joe Root and his men down in Australia. But let's talk to Ali, first of all, about England's Ashes travails down under and whether the tour has been just a tad too long. Right, it's a great pleasure now to welcome back to the Cricket Badger radio show podcast, Ali Martin of The Guardian. Ali, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, it's a while since we spoke, and, well, unfortunately, last time we spoke was just prior to the Ashes, and we were slightly pro-England at the time. It didn't quite work out that way. You've been down under this winter and witnessed the Test matches firsthand. What was that experience like?
Yeah, well, I mean, you always fly out with a sense of optimism and what could possibly be. It was tough. It was tough going. I don't think the pitch is made for great cricket, and Australia was just sort of a few percent better across the board. England sort of spun a narrative at the end about missing out on the crucial moments, but it didn't really stack up to me. Australia were just superior in their own backyard. Steve Smith, I mean, put on had a monster series, and those four bowlers sharing all the wickets for Australia throughout the series were just too good. They were just too good for England, and England did miss Ben Stokes, and the sort of the shadow of Ben Stokes and the incident in Bristol did hang over the tour because they kept going out, having a drink and being stupid, which sort of undermined them off the pitch as well. So not a great tour to report back on, I'm afraid, but some lessons learned, hopefully, for England. See how they can sort of pull themselves together for the New Zealand Test series that's coming up. There's a bit more cricket before then, isn't there?
Two little responses to what you've just said very quickly. You can't really argue with the fact that they did miss out on the crucial moments. There were just plenty of them, weren't there? That was the thing. There were far too many of the moments they missed out on, which is kind of the flippant response to what you've just said. But the other thing about going out and you saying it's a little bit silly. Yes, it was silly in the kind of context of the tour, but it's a hell of a long trip, isn't it? And you can't expect a load of blokes just to sit in hotel rooms and be in isolation. That is basically asking for mental issues and mental problems. You need to kind of wind down away from the cricket. Are we in danger of maybe going a little bit too far in the post-Stokes-Bristol situation of reacting a little bit too heavily to anything that happens? I mean, the Johnny Bairstow headbutt, the Ben Duckett little tete-a-tete with Jimmy Anderson, probably on other tours would not have even been worthy of comment.
No, they wouldn't, but that was kind of the point, was it? I totally agree with you about sort of locking players in their rooms at night. I think that would be too much, too far. It's a long time away from home. It's a career as well. These guys are professionals and they have the right to wind down when they're not on duty. I think they just needed to be a bit smarter about it. And that said, I mean, England, by sort of imposing the curfew, it's very strange. They exonerated Johnny Bairstow, saying, it was a nothing storm in a teacup, but they also reacted by imposing the curfew, and it sent out a bit of a mixed message, I thought. The Ben Duckett situation, that was slightly daft in itself, in that, this was a guy who hadn't played for England since being dropped during the India tour the year before. This was his big opportunity a day and a half later to play for what was a bit of a sort of scratch team of Lions players and reserves. But this was a big opportunity for him. So on a personal level, what is he doing out there at that time? And I think there was a bit of a few rights and wrongs, who did what, and a bit of hijinks and people letting off steam and what have you. But I just engage brain sometimes. That's all I'd say.
I take it, Ali, you followed the curfew to the letter, did you?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Yeah,
well, to be honest, most of the evenings were spent counting England players out and then counting them back in.
I mean, you mentioned it's a long trip. I mean, they landed in Australia on the 7th of November. That is a long time ago. I mean, I defy many listeners to actually remember back that far. I certainly can't. It's just after bonfire night, for goodness sake. I mean, I know the personnel have changed in the team and people have flown back and flown to and fro, but it's a long time for an England supporter, even somebody in Australia, to actually keep tabs on what's going on. Are we not playing too much cricket and trying to pack too much stuff in down under this winter?
Yeah, I think they possibly have been guilty of that. I mean, look, the one days, the 4-1 series win in the one days was a great result, and that was a cracking series. And no one was complaining about too much cricket then. But with a tour to New Zealand coming up, they've tried to be smart and pack in this sort of tri-series. They're trying to get, essentially knockout cricket experience in what are outside of tournaments and try and help the players in that way. But because they've scheduled so much, as you say, there's been players coming and going. There's a bit of resting going on. The T20 format always comes third in the pecking order when it comes to sort of managing player workloads. And it's been a slightly moribund tournament. I know Australia have just won it today, and good on them. They've sort of shown the virtues of backing T20 specialists, hot off a big bash and players in form, and it's worked out well for them. But for a touring side, even with players coming and going, it's such an epic winter, and we've sort of seen the coaching staff Trevor Bayliss has been ever present. I know it's his neck of the woods, but actually I understand that he's had 2 nights at home, his home in New South Wales, during this time. So you're asking a lot of the coaches, you're asking a lot of some of the multi-format players as well, even with rest factored in. Has public interest sort of waned a little bit, possibly slightly? There's 5 one-dayers with New Zealand coming up, but I don't know how excited people are about those, apart from the fact that Ben Stokes is coming back. And people do obviously enjoy watching this one-day side, but yeah, in short, epic winter, and perhaps one that they might want to rethink for future tours.
We'll come on to the coaching staff in a little while, but the comment you just made there, a lot of businesses in the UK promote work-life balance and making sure that people kind of like get a bit of a social life outside of work and stay rested and fresh. Trevor Bayliss must be absolutely knackered, mustn't he?
Yeah, and you can sort of sense that from some of the things he's been coming out with recently, which he's quite an independent kind of guy anyway. He's obviously a bit of an outsider, hired to sort of shake things up from an outsider's perspective, and perhaps not as invested as in English cricket as an English coach might be. And so he's making sort of all sorts of pronouncements, but that's kind of the nature of the guy. He's extremely relaxed. He's very upfront, straight-talking Aussie. If you ask him a question, he'll give you an honest answer. So, but it does appear from a distance now, as I am back in the UK, that he's slightly fading in terms of his energy levels. But having said that, there's still a bit to go, isn't there? So he's going to have to find some from somewhere.
I can understand why in the days where they used to sail down on a steamboat or whatever, and it took them 3 months to get there and 3 months to come home, that you tug on the New Zealand leg as part of the logistical plan, because you'd never know when you're going to get back there. But have we come to the time now where an Australian tour could actually work in isolation of a New Zealand leg after it?
I think so, and I think, I mean, just looking ahead to sort of beyond past the 2019 World Cup, which is when all the ICC's kind of future tours program sort of resets and goes back to, we hit the next cycle of international matches. We're going to see a bit more of this because we've got the Test League coming in of 9 nations. We've got the 13-team one-day league, and those series won't necessarily marry up in tours. So you might have an England Test side playing in Australia, but then an England one-day side playing in Sri Lanka, in the next sort of block of matches, as it were. So it might break up the touring structures as we know them a little bit. Certainly, if we look at the English summer that's coming up, that there'll be, from 2020 onwards, England will be playing 6 tests, 6 one-days and 6 T20s as their sort of stock sort of summer formula. And we'll see tourists coming and going a little bit more. So we might have, for example, next summer we've got Australia, Pakistan and India. Australia turning up for a sort of random 5-match one-day series. And I suspect that going forward at England are going to be similar in that they will be sort of dotting around the globe a bit more and perhaps not having these sort of long epic stretches in one country. But they're still working out the fixture list as we speak, so I could be terribly wrong and they might just revert to what they've always done.
We've seen Australia already playing two teams in different parts of the world at the same time, haven't we? With their test team disappearing off to South Africa and the T20 side left behind, as you said, made up of people that have been successful in the Big Bash, with only David Warner kind of staying to steer the ship. You could see England doing that in the future as well, couldn't you? Because the personnel, Joe Root, Moeen Ali aside, Ben Stokes as well, the personnel is different between the two sides. You could actually have two squads in different parts of the globe.
Yeah, I mean the sort of the landscape of cricket is really changing. The sort of the tectonic plates are moving.
It made your job quite difficult to cover both, wouldn't it, at the same time?
Well, there's a huge sort of separation of personnel, of skills. You obviously have some crossover with multi-format players, but they are separating out. England are actively encouraging this, to be honest. We've sort of spoken to Andrew Strauss in the past, and Tom Harrison, the chief exec. We spoke to him in Melbourne, I think, just before the Melbourne test. And this is the way England see the game going. They're encouraging specialism. They're trying to sort of drive people down different career paths. My fear, personally, is that it's the test career path that will become less appealing, but not so much because of the central contracts that test players get are very handsomely rewarded, but it's just the challenge of getting to that point in county cricket when you have two T20 competitions in the UK from 2020 onwards. Are players going to invest that amount of time and play the long game to play the long game, if you see what I mean? So that's the way it's going. But what actually comes out the other end and whether it's good for the game, well, it's a debate that we could have for hours and hours, and we probably still wouldn't get anywhere.
Ali Martin with me from The Guardian on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. We'll be back in just a second to talk about Adil Rashid, Alex Hales choosing a different path.
It's that Badger style.
Cricket Badger will be in Barbados in March, and you can get involved with a bit of Calypso Caribbean action. Get your business in front of the cricket world. Sponsor, advertise on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast through the 2 weeks in the Caribbean. It's obviously exciting for me, but we can make it work for you too. Contact cricketbadger@hotmail.com and we can get your business right in front and centre of the world of cricket. Break into the chat this week with Ali Martin to have a chat with James Middlebrook, the former Essex, Yorkshire and Northamptonshire all-rounder, who is now heading towards being a cricket umpire. Here's James and the challenges ahead for him.
It's that Badger style.
James Middlebrook, welcome to the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Retired from cricket, obviously now, and heading into umpiring. Is that a different challenge? Is that something that you're enjoying?
Oh, I love the umpiring. It's a nice feeling to be in the game, still have a part to play in the professional game, but also you don't have them ups and downs of when you do play, if you lose or win or get out or get 100. You don't have them sort of emotions, but you have different emotions with obviously hoping your game, you're in good position, you're giving the right decisions and playing the game or letting the game move on with being fair and in the spirit of the game.
It's an interesting time to get into umpiring as well, with all the DRS stuff and all the technology that's coming into the game. It's different than it was a few years back, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's I think a bit more scrutinised. Obviously, players have been scrutinised for 10, 15 years with the television, and obviously catches nowadays. Obviously, with the catching on the outfield and flips. Obviously, with the TV, it's getting more and more critical, and obviously with the DRS, and obviously teams having a certain amount of players to have with the DRS, it's quite important that we as umpires are sort of scrutinise and get the right decisions, on the field. So it is interesting with the DRS, but it's nothing different to playing. It's just obviously a different feeling if you could make the changes in the game, and obviously, hopefully, you get most things right.
When you came to the end of your playing days, James, and obviously I'll talk a little bit about your return to Yorkshire in a second, but you obviously you come to that point where you think, right, I've got to retire now, and you think, what do I do next? Was it a conscious decision to go into something that kept you within cricket and kept you in that sporting environment?
Yeah, I sort of touched a little bit with coaching. I quite enjoyed coaching with obviously elite players, but there's only so much you can do. You know, you can obviously help them this side of the white line, but once they cross that white line, it's out of your hands. And I quite like my own destiny, really, or in charge of my own destiny, with me being in charge of what I'm doing rather than 11 players crossing the white line and dictating my future, as it were. So I did cross umpiring with Peter Willey, Rob Bailey, Richard Kettleborough, 2012-13. Used to speak to him a little bit when I was non-striker then, and they said, you'd be a good candidate for an umpire. So I sort of did a few charity games in Northampton, and I quite enjoyed it and sort of got a little bit of a bug for it. So it's always a thought of mine to go down the route of umpiring, and got in touch with Chris Kelly, and he sort of helped me get started, as it were.
Just before I press record on this interview, you were in the gym, weren't you? And you got to be pretty fit to be an umpire these days. I mean, you're standing. It's a long day to stand in the field, isn't it? People kind of complain about long days in the field as a fielder. Well, umpires are doing exactly the same thing. Exactly.
Every day is a fielding day, so you have got to do a lot of standing, and I wouldn't say it's as demanding as fielding or bowling, but it's certainly demanding. Just stood there, and you have to be fit, and speaking to the sort of the big boys, and they're all about being fit now. And I've always enjoyed my fitness, and I've had a couple of months off, after the season, and it's now time to reset and get back into the gym for the start of the season. And obviously, the fitter you are, the fresher you are, the better sleep you get, and obviously you're a bit more conscious on the pitch.
Like you just said there, it's about being alert as well. You get into that final session of the day. If you're dozing off, it could be the major moment that you miss, isn't it?
Exactly, and just being fresh and being fit, you think clearer. So hopefully things happen slower because I am fitter. But yeah, it's always been a part of my life, sort of the gym. Even though I did begrudge it sometimes when I was at Essex, but it sort of started coming into the game. But you sort of had a great mentor in Andy Flower at Essex. He just said, look, the older you get, you've got to get into the gym and get fitter. And that's probably why he was so good for so long, because he was, him and Grant Flower, one of the fittest blokes on the staff at Essex. And they were probably the oldest boys on the staff. So I sort of took note on, that, and it sort of came into my game the older I got.
How hard is it to finish as a player? You had a long career. You had your success on the county circuit. You mentioned Essex, but Northampton and Yorkshire as well. You come to that stage where you think, right, it's time to hang the boots up. How difficult a transition is that from being a player to being somebody else?
Well, the 2014, when I got released from Northampton, I had my best season ever with bat and ball. I had to open the batting at Northampton because apparently I had the best technique and nobody else wanted to do it. So I relished that challenge and got nearly 1,000 runs and 40-odd wickets, and I wasn't ready to retire. Even though I had umpiring in the pipeline, I wasn't ready. My hand was forced, and then I went away that winter to Melbourne and did a little bit of proing, but also umpiring, and I sort of got into umpiring a little bit more, being abroad. And then obviously when I came back, I had the opportunity to go back to Yorkshire, which was always nice. And it was never a career that I wanted to start up again. I sort of got my head around that I'd retired, but it was nice just to finish off by a couple of games. So Yorkshire obviously winning the championship. So I sort of knew then there was sort of hints and talks with Gailey and Martin, maybe do another year. But also that year I'd been doing second 11 umpiring, and I knew my career had to start somewhere, and why not finish with the county championship?
How disappointed were you to leave Northampton then? Because, like you say, you finished on a high, certainly individually, as a player there. But, you had a long time there, didn't you? Yeah,
I had 5 great years. Another, I wouldn't say a small club, but you are very close to your members and your supporters, a bit like Essex. And it was a family feel club, and I really enjoyed my time there. And the players and the backroom staff were brilliant. And I just enjoyed Northampton in general. Just sort of give me the freedom. I know David Capel got me there. He gave me the freedom to play with a bit of freedom, and I played as a bloke, or I wanted to play where sometimes I might have felt restricted, or so he sort of gave me that freedom again, and then Rip sort of enhanced that at the latter part of my career, and it was an enjoyable 5 years.
And when the call from Yorkshire came to come, because it was Adil Rashid, wasn't it, who was basically getting called up for England, and they were worried that they hadn't got the spin options there. Was that completely out of the blue?
Oh yeah, I was having tea at mum and dad's with my wife, and this phone call went about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and it's Gailey. I'm thinking, what's he on? And I didn't answer it. So I went and listened to the answer phone message. He was driving back from Nottingham.
You call screened him, did you? You didn't just dive on it?
I didn't. I looked at it. I was eating halfway through dinner. I thought, well, I'd rather eat my food than answer to Gailey. So I sort of rang him back. Well, listened to the voicemail about 20 minutes later, and went upstairs and thinking, is this real what he's just saying? And went down and spoke to the wife and sort of said, look, I don't feel ready yet. I've not really prepared for this. And then I spoke to Stephen Peters down in Northampton, who's a good friend of mine, and he said, well, what have you got to lose? It's only one game. Do it. So that was sort of the final straw, and yeah, it sort of came out, and I ended up playing 6 Champos and a couple of T20s, which was all enjoyable.
I saw your quotes. I was just reading a few things a few minutes ago, and I saw your quote saying that it was only going to be one game, wasn't it? And
it was only one game, yeah.
And it lasted a bit longer. That you ended up with a championship as well out of it, which was one of Yorkshire's best seasons in recent times, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I think we got the record points. We sort of won it with 2 games to go, which is sort of unheard of. And you did feel an air of confidence in the squad, but they weren't big-headed. It was just, we believe that Tim Bresnan will do his job, Jack Brooks will do his job, Brian Sidebottom will do his job, and then the batters will get the runs, and things just sort of taking care of themselves. Obviously, Johnny Bairstow played, I think, 10 games that year and got over 1,000 runs, but he got them quickly. So it allowed us to get wickets or have more time to bowl sides out. And we were just confident. The lads at the slips were catching, pigeons all day long. So everyone just knew their own game and got on with their own game and sort of did the job without, being big-headed. Just did it and had a belief.
If you've been following us on Twitter, on the @cricket_badger Twitter feed, you'll know that we've been running polls over the last few months for the greatest ever England, Australia and Pakistan cricketer. Congratulations to Ian Botham, Don Bradman and Imran Khan for winning those awards so far. Stay tuned, stay tweeting, because over the next few weeks we're going to be finding the greatest ever West Indian cricketer. Plenty of fantastic players have represented the Caribbean islands. Who is the best of them all? Did that success with Yorkshire make you want to stay? I mean, I know you said that you felt it was the right time to go into umpiring, but after winning the championship and being part of a very successful Yorkshire side, wasn't there a bit of you that thought, I could give this one more year? Yeah.
I had to have a little chat, and I didn't know if they were deadly serious, and I was deadly serious about umpiring, so it would have been nice maybe to have one more year, but then that would have put me one more year back in umpiring, and I knew umpiring. I dabbled in it for 3 or 4 years up to that point, and did a lot of second team cricket, and it was, there's never a right time to stop and have a career change, but it was the right time. I'd won a county championship. What else do I need to do? I didn't really want to play one-day cricket. Am I just stalling the inevitable? So it was a good way to go out on a high, winning the championship, and then I can now focus on my umpiring, and the transition is going pretty well at the minute.
A lot of people say when they retire that they miss the dressing room and the camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. As an umpire, you're in a little room with just 2 of you, aren't you? Is that a different kind of vibe?
It's a different one. Obviously, the boys on the umpiring circuit, they have a laugh, and obviously we are serious at the right time. But when you've got 12, 13 players in the dressing room, you can mingle around, and whereas obviously just you and your mate, so it can be hard work for 4 days sometimes. But like you say, when you have a team dressing room and coaches, time just goes really fast, and it's very enjoyable.
When you start out as an umpire, then kind of relate it to how you started out as a player. Obviously when you're coming through as a young player, you've got ambitions, you want to go on and do this, that and the other and play for England and all the rest of it. Have you got the same kind of feelings as an umpire, that you want to achieve certain things in the game?
Oh, definitely. I speak to Kets quite frequently, and he's sort of a role model, as it were, in umpiring world, as say someone like Darren Lehman was in cricket, or John Embry when I was growing up. So I have that ambition of getting hopefully first team cricket this year, and maybe try and get on the full panel in the next couple of years, and then obviously further in my career and maybe try and get on the ICC and the elite umpiring. That is a plan or a goal. And just as a player, you start from the bottom and work your way up, and it's no different in umpiring. So I'm just learning that I know the game as well as other people. It's just now learning how to conduct myself as an umpire like we would as a cricketer, going through the ranks. So it's just a learning curve. I'm trying to, do the best I can do and try and get my decisions right.
You turn the TV on and there's like test matches being played all over the world, and you see a lot of the English guys, don't you, kind of standing in test matches and one-day internationals around the world. It's not a bad life. You follow the sun as a cricketer, you follow the sun as an umpire, don't you?
Yeah, obviously you follow the sun. We don't play in bad weather cricket, so it's not a bad thing. You do follow the sun. I know these boys it looks glamorous, and obviously hotels and everything, but I don't know if they've got small families or big families, and maybe being away from that for 2 or 3, 4 weeks at a time can be quite hard, but sometimes you just take the rough with the smooth, and I know my family's used to me being away, so it's just the same, our lifestyle, really.
When you look back at your playing days, what are the highlights of your career on the county circuit? What are the things that stand out for you?
Winning the championship 2001 and 2015 with Yorkshire. I'm a purist. I love the longer format of the game. I've always enjoyed hard-fought battles. But also winning the T20 with Northampton, just a great journey. We had belief, and having someone like Cameron White, who was very methodical in the middle order, just sort of calmed everybody down, and people just got on with the job, and we knew where we fielded, we knew how we batted, we knew how we bowled, and we had a great formula, and Rip sort of gave us a little bit of belief, and we were the underdogs, and we went out and obviously smashed it. So I think the highlights, the shorter format with Northampton, maybe the longer format's more 4-day cricket with Yorkshire.
If you compare the two, which is the biggest achievement? Because Northampton's been a unfancied, if that's the right term, club. That to me would be probably a bit sort of punching above their weight, and a bigger achievement than maybe Yorkshire, who are a big county, winning the championship.
Yeah, obviously you're going as underdogs, so you haven't got that pressure. So if you do lose, it's expected, and if you win, it's obviously a bit like last night with Wigan against Man City. That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, so you're always a little bit less pressure, whereas when I play with Yorkshire, we are expected by, us as a squad, members, and obviously the county circuit as a big club, and you're sort of expected to win the county championship. But I think the boys, when they won it in 2015, they won it with style and grace, and obviously they smashed the points, and we just kept winning games. So it's a totally different feeling winning the T20 with Northants to winning the county championship with Yorkshire in pressure. One's obviously expected, and one's, you buy the underdogs, get on with it. So that was good.
Just to round off, James, and just back to your umpiring to finish with. As a player, I guess you know the rules, you know how the game's played and everything. Are there things you've learnt about the cricket since you become an umpire that you never even considered beforehand? Like some of the rules and some of the things that you never even thought existed?
Oh, very much so. And obviously you have to know the rules and regs for each competition. And obviously now the laws and regulations this year have been sort of brought together more in line. So it's a little bit easier. We had a meeting the other week about the law changes, and it's just good to talk to your peers and discuss that. And it's a little bit more. Well, the players come to you now as an umpire, whereas obviously as a player I used to go to the umpire, and I would expect them to know what the question I would ask if it was regarding the game. So you have to know a little bit more about the rules and regs and the laws. But it's a nice pressure. It's a nice feeling that you can help the game and watch the game from probably the best seat in the house.
And as a batsman, you bat in pairs. As bowlers, you bowl in pairs. As umpires, as we said, you perform in pairs as well. As a younger sort of junior umpire coming through, I guess you're relying a lot on some of the senior men at the other end as well to maybe guide you through at times.
Well, it's just I'm a big believer that you learn on the job rather than probably in a classroom. Just stood with the other boys or watching them, how they conduct, how they react to certain things is quite good. And you need to learn sometimes the hard way and do fail, and then speak to people afterwards and how they would change it. And I do speak to Alex Wharf quite a lot about that and how it makes me feel at the time. And he's like, well, just, bottle that up and remember it for next time. So hopefully you don't get into that mistake again. And he said, you will make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Just obviously try not to let the people see that, and then make sure you rectify it and don't do it again. So it's just learning from your mistakes as an umpire and trying to keep the game going and running smoothly.
I guess it must be quite a lonely feeling if you know you've just done a howler and somebody's edged one and you've not given it out or whatever, and everybody's chuntering about it on the pitch. You're a bit exposed out there, aren't you?
Yeah, I remember once in Australia in a grade A game, which obviously is high quality over there, and this leg spinner gave a first ball, hit him flush on the foot, smashing all the wickets, but the ball raced back to mid-off, so I thought he'd hit it. And I just didn't give it out, but I knew it were out, but I just didn't give it out because of the reaction of the ball, and it bothered me for days.
Yeah.
And I knew it got out 3 or 4 balls later, which is irrelevant, but and the team that were bowling did win the game in the end. So I just said to the captain afterwards, I said, look, I'm sorry, pal, I messed that up. He went, no, don't worry about it. But I knew deep down it were a howler. But at the time I just froze and didn't give it out. And I look back now thinking it was an easy decision. So it does happen, but I've learnt that, I've logged it, it's back in the mind, and now I'm like, I won't do that again, as it were.
When you say he was out 2 or 3 balls later, that wasn't you trying to level the playing field?
No, he sort of ran past one at the other hour at square leg. He ran past one and missed one, so it was more run out than stumped, but it was finished the game. But yeah, it just sticks in the mind as that one quite a lot.
End of a long and distinguished career, but a start of another one. So wish you every success with your umpiring, James, and all the best. And thanks for being a guest this week on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast.
No worries. Thank you, James.
Thanks to James Middlebrook this week. Interesting chat there about what it takes to swap the dressing room for the umpire's cloakroom and the challenges of standing there all day long making the decisions on the cricket that we watch. Now back to Ali Martin. We're going to be talking Adil Rashid and Alex Hales. Is it the right move to swap the red ball for the white ball?
It's that Badger style.
Ali, we've seen that over the last couple of days, Adil Rashid's come out. He's basically said that he's going to have a year off from red ball cricket. Hot on the heels of that, Alex Hales has come out and said he's having 18 months off from red ball cricket. So both Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire are going to be without 2 of their stars in the county championship for the foreseeable anyway. Is this just a case of 2 guys here, 2 young guys who maybe are finding it harder than they anticipated to get into the test team, basically just saying, show me the money, I want to play T20 cricket, let's rack up these competitions around the world and let's fill my bank balance?
Yeah, it's. I think until both players do a proper sit-down interviews and we get a real understanding of what's going through their minds with these decisions, we're going to be speculating a little bit. But they've put out sort of quotes and statements through their sort of club websites and Twitter feeds and what have you. Looking from afar, I mean, I guess probably should treat them both in isolation. I could see that Rashid would probably look at the selection of Mason Crane over the winter, having toured with England the previous 2 winters. All 10 of his test camps have come overseas. To see Mason Crane, a guy with very limited first-class experience, leap ahead of him might have been a bit dispiriting. He has obviously had a slightly sort of fractious relationship with Yorkshire during his career. He's had fallouts with Andrew Gale in the past, and certainly over that missed championship decider at Lords against Middlesex 18 months ago as well. So, but I just get the sense from Rashid, perhaps he's just sort of, if the carrot of Test cricket isn't there, he may have slightly fallen out of love with the red ball game. He sees this as a way he wants to become the best white ball bowler he can be, and he's very much trusted by Owen Morgan. He's a key part of Owen Morgan's one-day setup. And with 2020 opportunities around the world, is that he's decided to throw his lot into white ball. Whether that is a good move from a bowling perspective will be interesting to see, because, I mean, these one-day players, part of their sort of game is about calculated risk. And this seems to be a calculated risk because without consistently bowling in 4-day cricket, will Rashid still, is there any chance he could lose the art of building up a spell, working out batsmen, etc.? I mean, it's hugely different I think 50 over cricket's becoming very different to T20 cricket.
Yeah.
In 50 over cricket, you still have to put together a spell and work out a player. T20 cricket, you're kind of chucking up there with your variations and hoping that the guys don't pick you or choose to slog the wrong ball.
We've seen that this winter, haven't we, with England? The results, Test cricket bad, 50 over cricket good, T20 cricket not quite so good. So the formats do provide totally different challenges, don't they?
Yeah, and so I'm not necessarily saying that Rashid will become a worse bowler for it. He's obviously doing it to become a better bowler. I'm just interested to see how it's going to pan out for him, and will there be a knock-on effect for him for his bowling? But a lot of people will say, he's trying to play Championship cricket and Test cricket. I mean, I personally I like to see these guys live out their dreams rather than other people. So just because a supporter might say, well, this is, I think Test is the best, well, you've got to accept that some people have different views on it. Hales is an interesting case. I mean, I understand he's been thinking about this for about 6 months, but I find the timing of it quite interesting because we're just about to start this one-day series in New Zealand, and Hales having formed such a great partnership at the top of the England one-day order with Jason Roy. I think he's got 5 centuries since the last World Cup. Those two had looked like we're going to be England's opening pair for the next World Cup. But he lost his place at the back end of the summer. Part of that was the Bristol incident. He came out of the team. Johnny Bairstow was already in there, having replaced Jason Roy. Roy came back in, took his opportunity. Now it's Roy and Bairstow as the opening two, and with Ben Stokes coming back into the team, Alex Hales, who's been batting at number 3 in Australia, could lose his place altogether. So it's going to be quite an interesting few weeks for him. It's a very ballsy call. Both players, Rashid and Hales, haven't been picked up by the IPL either. So in essence, they have made this move to give themselves what is going to be sort of 4 weeks at the start of the English summer off before the Royal London starts in mid-May. So it's hugely sort of bold moves by the pair. I wouldn't necessarily chastise them for making it, but it's kind of opened up. It's got people talking about the wider picture, which is the direction of travel for English cricket. Where's it going? And Test cricket and white ball cricket. There seems things are moving at such a pace. These guys are sort of symptoms of that. I'd never criticise the player, but it's the way that the schedule is being mapped out by administrators. Hugely bloated, more cricket being trowelled on top of more cricket, especially with a new competition coming up in England to sit alongside the Blast. They're asking so much of players. It's almost sort of forcing them to make these decisions. And to some supporters, Yorkshire and Notts, for example, they're going to find it a bit unpalatable in the short term. But it seems to be the way that the game's going.
We talked about the Ashes Test series earlier, but you mentioned Mason Crane there in instead of Adil Rashid. Adil Rashid's stock probably rose because Mason Crane wasn't marvellous and England failed. Alex Hales watched from a distance as James Vince and didn't really make the most of his chances in the middle order. So in a way, both Rashid and Hales are probably closer to the Test team now than they've been for a while, because often stock rises when teams fail and you're not playing. So it does seem a bit of a strange one, doesn't it?
Yeah, as you say, I don't think they're too far away from it. And actually, if you look at, Mason Crane's been playing for England Lions in the West Indies. They've just gone 2-0 down in their series. And I think Liam Livingstone has bowled twice as many overs of his off breaks, part-timer than Mason Crane's bowled. So Crane is so far from being the finished article. England clearly like him and they want to invest in him long-term, etc. But Rashid was probably closer than he may have thought, but perhaps, it is reasonably telling that his county colleague Joe Root is the England captain and Rashid is yet to play under him. So perhaps, if you're going to read between the lines there, is that Rashid probably knows that Root doesn't fancy him for Test cricket.
I'm going to bring up my Yorkshire bias here, Ali, which is I always keep very well hidden. The Adil Rashid to me is a massive wasted talent as far as England are concerned. I think England are very, very good at having players who are confident players. The likes of Ben Stokes and Joe Root that go in and know their own game, that are confident, they just let them go and obviously they succeed. But with people like Adil Rashid and Gary Ballance, who are maybe a little bit more fragile mentally, they are rubbish at actually putting them together mentally and getting them out on a test pitch and firing on all cylinders. They have a couple of failures, they disappear again, and 18 months later they maybe tentatively bring them back. To me, Adil Rashid has been is the epitome of what you call a confidence player. He's a guy that needs an arm around him. He needs to know that he's loved and needs to know that he's contributing to a team and he's valued. And I don't think he's ever really felt that with England. He spent winters carrying drinks early on in his career. He spent the last couple of winters playing a few test matches, but then discarded for the summer. I can see why he has this kind of like viewpoint on test cricket. I don't think he's ever really felt part of that test system.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly, if you contrast that with the captaincy of Owen Morgan, who's really backed his man. I think there's very early on in sort of England's one day revival at Trent Bridge where Morgan brought Rashid on to bowl the 49th over in I think it was a Trent Bridge against New Zealand. New Zealand was sort of going for the swing for the rafters, and I think Morgan has always sort of backed him. He's told him never to worry about the run rate and just take wickets, that's your job. I'm not sure Alistair Cook quite knew how to handle him, but at the same time, I think some of it has to fall on Rashid's door as well, in that perhaps, he has played 10 test matches, that's is an opportunity, and now he's packed it in, and I just wonder whether, at 29, so I think he's just turned 30, this is when he should be just coming into his prime. It strikes me as a little bit of a shame that he's walked away from it. Perhaps he's had a taste of it and thought, you know what, I just don't know if I'm good enough at test level. I mean, you follow Yorkshire a lot more closely than me, but the way that Yorkshire have used him in their 4-day cricket is something that England's never quite replicated, and they've only used him in the subcontinent as a sort of second spinner to Moeen Ali, who in those two series didn't go very well himself. So
I'll tell you, I think Adil Rashid is by far the best spinner that England have at their disposal at the moment. I mean, Leach is untried at Somerset and he could rival him, but I think in terms of Moeen Ali and Mason Crane, the two most recently used, Adil Rashid's head and shoulders above those in terms of spin bowling.
Yeah, but we are where we are right now, and Adil Rashid won't be playing Test cricket now. He's made that choice.
Thank you for listening to the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. We really appreciate the feedback you send us. You can get involved in the show. Contact us, cricketbadger@hotmail.com. Tweet us @cricket_badger. Follow us on YouTube and stay tuned over the next few weeks as we go through Barbados and the English summer. Loads and loads of great guests coming up on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Obviously the first for England, but we've seen in the West Indies, the guys there that have been playing T20 cricket and not been playing for the West Indies, it seems to now become, the danger is, and you hinted at this earlier, that this could become a bit of a growing trend and fractures between the various formats and almost the different formats of the game becoming almost different sports and played by different people. Is the fact that Rashid and Hales, though, have actually done what they've done in the last week bad for the county game? Does this actually send out the wrong message to younger players and potentially send out the wrong message to supporters? Because I can tell you now that there'll be a lot of chuntering around Yorkshire. Adil Rashid, what's he doing? 4-day cricket, the county championship, that's sacrosanct. That's what Yorkshire are going to be aiming at, and Rashid's letting us down.
Yeah, I mean there will be people saying that, and I saw Harry Gurney on Twitter yesterday, that Alex Hales is Nottinghamshire teammate, sort of saying that it's kind of some of the attitudes towards red ball cricket are why it's sort of driving people in that direction. There's a lot of doom and gloom around it. I don't know if that's an entirely fair reflection, because I think the county championship is still a terrific competition, but it's what it says about for young players. It's a tricky one, because these are two guys who have hit a peak and a level with England where England have given them white ball central contracts. Now those central contracts are giving them the sort of financial leeway to say, I don't know if I have to play 4-day cricket to make a good living, and if I don't, then it will open up opportunities elsewhere, potentially. I suspect young players are still going to have to sort of earn the right to get to that level, certainly in the short term. But in terms of the long term, I don't know. I look at the future landscape of the game. I keep referencing two T20 competitions. If the Blast stays at its current sort of size and the new T20 competition comes in, which it is, a sort of a top English T20 player who plays for both his county and for a franchise, or not a franchise, a city or a regional team in that, whatever we're going to call it, they will play up to 27 games of T20 in an English summer. So I can see that potentially driving people into specialism perhaps a little bit more, because there's a big volume of cricket there, plus the overseas opportunities, plus potentially England white ball cricket. I can see that driving people, and I don't know if it would necessarily be a snub on championship cricket, but it might just be where certain people feel their skills are they're going to maximise their earnings and maximise their skills. So.
It's an easy life though for a cricketer, isn't it? I mean, I can hear Fred Trueman turning in his grave because with quick maths there, 27 games of T20 is 108 overs potentially maximum.
Yeah.
You imagine Fred Trueman saying, "I can spend a summer bowling just 108 overs." He'd have loved it.
Yeah, no, you do that in just under a month, I thought. But yeah, look, the game is sort of cracking and mutating in front of our very eyes. And while we've got a bit of clarity up to 2024, because England have just announced the sort of major match venues and they've allocated these new T20 teams, and we're kind of locked into a set path at the moment. We have had, for example, Josh Butler recently saying that Test cricket, cricket could be a one-format sport in 15 to 20 years' time. And I think for anyone who loves, first-class cricket, Test cricket, it's quite disheartening to hear that. And we'll be hoping that isn't the case.
Just to round off on Rashid and Hales, I get the impression from the Alex Hales situation that he has been talking about this for a long time, and this has been a few discussions in the making, shall we say. But with the response that Yorkshire gave to the Adil Rashid thing, it struck me that it seemed to be more of a surprise to Martin Moxon and Andrew Gale that Rashid had done what he'd done, and that they could have probably been better served by knowing in advance before they potentially signed batsmen as their overseas players and made plans for the 2018 season. We've seen Jason Gillespie's taken Rashid Khan to Sussex and other spinners have gone elsewhere. Maybe Rashid has done this off the back of chatting to Hales overseas or something like that, but it doesn't seem that he's given Yorkshire quite as much notice.
Yeah, well, it's no coincidence that all this is sort of emerging at a time when the England squad are together. There's a lot of time in between games, etc., to sort of chat through all these sort of career opportunities that present themselves to each other. I mean, it's tricky with Rashid. There was probably never going to be a good time. I suppose at the end of last season, if this was really how he was thinking, it might have been a bit more handy for Yorkshire, because while he has taken a pay cut and that does free up some money, Yorkshire will be looking around now. As you say, they've already got their overseas players sorted, and they're probably going to have to back the youngsters, because you don't just sort of get a spinner, and not just a spinner. But I mean, Rashid is a 2-in-1 player, isn't he? He balances that Yorkshire team so well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he bats at 6 or 7 or in that order, and he's kind of the equivalent of Ben Stokes for Yorkshire, isn't he?
Yeah, so it has left them in a bit of a bind, and Nottinghamshire certainly seem a bit more sanguine about Hales. I suppose it's a slightly easier replacement, and they haven't signed their overseas yet. They are now leaning towards a batsman. So, I don't think, as I say, just from the outside, and I may be completely off the mark here, but you just sense that Rashid and Yorkshire has never been a completely harmonious relationship. Whether that's personalities involved, as I say, that championship decider, perhaps there's a bit of a hangover from that. I mean, his first class record last year for Yorkshire wasn't actually, he didn't really pull up any trees, but maybe again he might have lost a bit of heart or a bit of confidence from his winter that he had, and Yorkshire didn't set the world alight last summer. But it's just a bit of a, I think we all just think it's a bit of a shame, but actually, I think the administrators need to look at how much cricket they're asking these guys to play. And I know you can talk about Fred Trueman saying, well, they've got it easy, but at the same time, it's now a sort of year-round sport with opportunities both at home and overseas. The IPL overlapping with the start of the championship season, England commitments. We're asking so much of these guys, and some of these guys, Rashid, he's got a young family. He's probably going to do what he feels is right for him, and that's what he's done. And in that regard, I certainly don't hold it against the player, but I would possibly look at the people running the game and just say, are we sure we're heading in the right direction here? And are you sure that the volume of cricket is the right amount at the moment, and whether it could just be slimmed down a bit to let people breathe a little bit more? But maybe that could also be a selfish hack who also doesn't want to be spending 200 nights on the road.
Yeah, you cover England cricket and obviously been down to Australia, but you'll have also done your fair share of Championship cricket as well, as have I. And I spent a long time covering Yorkshire home and away, and I don't think people actually, you get a proper glimpse of the treadmill when you're actually following the team around all the time, and you realise that the couple of days off in between matches are predominantly spent travelling, or they're training, or they're doing something, and the actual number of days off where a player actually is able to just completely chill out and get away from cricket are few and far between. Rashid and Hales, just a final point on this subject, Rashid and Hales are not going to be the only ones that do this. I think over the next 24 months we'll see a few more.
Yeah, in the short term, I expect them probably to be the only two, possibly in the next year. But I think after that, looking sort of the World Cup and beyond, we can see more players going down this route. You're right. I mean, the county championship is a sort of, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that's one of its sort of charms in a way, that it is, come the end of the season, the players are pretty knackered, but they feel like they've really earned their corn, and their success is well earned. But you do see them sort of schlepping up and down the country, and also part of it, I mean, especially for someone like Hales, who will be a player who gets off on playing in front of big crowds, big event cricket, to spend 2 days in a field, and there's obviously a huge support for the county championship and a huge following, but not necessarily people in the ground sort of willing you on, and there can be quite a bit of navel gazing out there at sort of long leg, is that there possibly just isn't that incentive to play it, especially if your test dream, you think it's over, basically. So yeah, that's where I'd again go back to the people running the game and just say, look, are we maximising? If you're going to have 3 formats, and I think we will want 3 formats to remain in place, or certainly we want Test cricket and red ball to remain in place, but what is the best way that we can structure this so that people do want to play it, and people retain ambitions to play Test cricket? But that's clearly the game is splintering off, and goodness knows how it's going to look, as Josh Butler says, in 15 to 20 years' time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how, if we had a crystal ball and we could just move forward 5 or 10 years, it would be very interesting to see what it looked like. And maybe the guy that's come back from 2030, that's doing all these interviews in America at the moment, can tell us what cricket looks like in 2030. Ali Martin is my guest on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast this week. Be back in just a second. We'll talk about Trevor Bayliss. Is he a hit or a miss with England, and who's going to be the person to replace him? Cricket Badger will be in Barbados in March, and you can get involved with a bit of Calypso Caribbean action. Get your business in front of the cricket world. Sponsor, advertise on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast through the 2 weeks in the Caribbean. It's obviously exciting for me, but we can make it work for you too. Contact cricketbadger@hotmail.com and we can get your business right in front and centre of the world of cricket. Ali Martin, good to have you back on. It seems a while since you were on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast, before the Ashes, and we talked about it being a long winter. It was before that winter started that we spoke to you on the podcast. But one man that's had a very busy winter, as we've said already this week, Trevor Bayliss. He's not had much time at home. He's had a very hard winter. It's been dispiriting probably at times for him. He's not a man, though. I mean, you've seen him at close quarters down under, but he's not a man that has particularly inspired me, and I do find it very difficult to see an Australian in an England tracksuit talking about Ashes defeats. It's I'm not sure he's the right man for this. I know he's going to be looking to move on in 2019. How have you gauged his tenure?
Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I suppose if we're just going to look at the numbers, then you're going to say that he's now, as a result of the 4-0 defeat in Australia, that he's now lost more tests than he's won. There's been success along the way. There's been the Ashes in 2015. There was a cracking win in South Africa that winter. There's been 2 very tough winters in India and Australia. When England last played Pakistan, it was a 2-2 draw, and I think people felt like that was one that got away a bit. Have England progressed? Have they moved forward? Are they still essentially a team built around sort of Cook, Root, Broad, Anderson? They probably are. There's been a big churn and turnover of players in that time, especially in the batting, and we've probably only just seen David Malan really take that opportunity. If we're just talking Test cricket, I would say that there has been a slight period of stagnation. We have a new captain in Joe Root. I don't think that Bayliss and Cook was necessarily the best fit, and I think possibly where Cook, one of the reasons why Cook thought it's time to let the likes of sort of Root, Bairstow, Stokes take over the dressing room and let the senior players himself, Broad and Anderson, just concentrate on their games. But it's very tricky with cricket because I'm always wary of falling into the trap of football in that there's so much focus on football and the manager. And as we know, the cricket doesn't work like football in that regard. An England coach is there to sort of, he's obviously there to take people to the next level when they get that international call-up. But he is slightly beholden to the players thrown up to him by the selectors. And as I mentioned, there's been a huge turnover in that regard. We're just seeing the Lions struggling at the moment in West Indies. And we have to say, is English cricket, is its red ball health in terms of the players that it's throwing up? Is is it delivering the goods at the moment? And I think that clearly falls outside of Trevor Bayliss's remit. But obviously, he's a guy that's pretty much admits that he doesn't follow the County Championship as closely as he could do. But then, as I say, his schedule is very busy. So in isolation, the Test side hasn't possibly progressed as we'd have hoped. But I do think that England's one-day team has, to an extent that it kind of mitigates some of that sort of shortfall in Test cricket, because there has been a bit of a revolution in 50-over cricket, and along with Owen Morgan, I think that Bayliss deserves a huge amount of credit for his role in that. Could then come on to the argument, well, should we be splitting up the coaches? And there is certainly an argument for that. But I still feel that, England, having had that harrowing World Cup in 2015, and it really was the pits, and to have turned it round like they have, if you're having one man for the job, and Trevor Bayliss is that, I think that the credit from doing that at the moment outweighs that. And given that we know his tenure runs up to 2019 and that he won't be renewing his contract, I would say that, I'm not calling for regime change at the moment. That said, he himself seems to be sort of making some noises.
Yes.
That the sort of three formats is asking a lot of one person. He's obviously saying this at the back of a very long winter, and he's quite knackered.
What he's come out and said, Ali, is that he's basically saying that T20 internationals are potentially surplus to requirements, which seems to be a very strange thing for a guy that's kind of being heralded by yourself and others as the saviour of white ball cricket for England. That he's basically diminishing the importance of T20 internationals in an environment, as we've spoken about already in this podcast, where T20 is the future for many people.
Yeah, I mean, his argument that T20 should be played at the domestic level, and that there's outside of World T20s and possibly the lead up to those, you don't really need T20 cricket international level, it's not a particularly new or original opinion. I think a lot of people have held it, since T20 came in, and actually, but personally, I think in a congested schedule, I can see the merits of what he's saying. But I, from a sort of just looking specifically at him and his role, it is a very strange thing to say. Firstly, because England have just announced, as I said earlier, that they will be playing 60-20 matches a summer up until 2024. So he's not exactly, he's not exactly aligned with the ECB's direction of travel.
And the ECB aren't going to change that just because he said what he said, are they?
No, exactly. And I also find it strange that he would, if he envisaged the split, that he would see the split being Test and one day and one coach and T20s another. Now, there could be a pragmatic reason for this in that the 2020 World Cup, the next one is in 2020. He runs up to 2019. It makes sense for whoever's going to lead that coaching staff into that competition to sort of bed in earlier and do that, to do that role early. So perhaps he's just saying it from a pragmatic view that, someone like, he suggested Paul Farbrace. There's been Paul Collingwood mentioned as an alternative as well. Obviously Chris Silverwood, who had success with Essex and now the bowling coach, may also being lined up for a sort of a big role down the line. So he may just be saying it from a pragmatic view that might be the way to go, and possibly a slightly selfish view because he's quite knackered, which is understandable. But it's a slightly odd split because people would naturally put the two white ball formats together and separate from to Test cricket. And if you were going to split the coaches, and I'm not necessarily against that, that's how I'd do it, and I imagine that's how most people would do it.
I think Farbrace would make a very good T20 coach for England. I saw his impact when he came to Yorkshire alongside Jason Gillespie, and he really did get that team ticking in the first year at Yorkshire as a T20 coach. But that said, it would be a good opportunity for England to blood Paul Collingwood in a headline role, and they obviously see him as a future coach. He's getting more and more involved in England's activities. Put him in charge of a T20 side. He knows the game inside out. Maybe it's a chance for him.
Yeah. The only issue that they might have, and when they split the coaching before, we had Andy Flower, who was the team director and test coach, and then you had Ashley Giles as the limited overs coach. And that Giles, in most of the time that he did it, felt that he was getting the arse end of the selection debate in that when it came to resting players, it was always his format that made way.
Yeah.
If you had someone sitting over them as we do right now in Andrew Strauss that would perhaps play King Solomon a bit better and divide things up, and prioritise in that regard, it might help. But you are still going to, any whoever comes in as T20 coach, they're still going to be without some of the big players you suspect in the short term. England's view at the moment, the view of the management at the moment, and the selection panel is very much that T20 Internationals is a great proving ground, to get guys in. We saw Liam Livingstone making his debut last year. They learnt about Liam Livingstone. He didn't come off in those games against South Africa. In fact, he slightly froze on the big stage, but they discovered that about him. And he probably discovered it about himself. We saw Mason Crane get a game in those as well. Because the the World T20 is not for another couple of years, they haven't prioritised that format at the moment. And that will probably continue whether it's a new coach or the existing ones. That would be the only caveat I'd say to sort of freshening it up, because a new coach coming in, who knows, he might have fresh ideas and want different personnel from the guys overlapping. But who isn't going to want Ben Stokes? But the fact is, Ben Stokes isn't going to be able to play everything. And with the next World T20 so far away, it is going to be T20 he misses when he misses games.
I can certainly see the benefit, Ali, of having split coaches, as I can with split captaincies. But isn't the danger sometimes? I hark back to Nasser Hussain when he was Test captain. Michael Vaughan was appointed as one-day captain. Michael Vaughan started doing really well in that capacity. Nasser Hussain had a bit of a dodgy trot, and all of a sudden Michael Vaughan takes charge. Doesn't sometimes the team that's doing the worst end up with that coach or captain being under the most pressure, and the other guy end up taking it over anyway?
Yeah, potentially. I suppose Owen Morgan would be the guy that would sort of bind the two setups. But again, I mean, you would then have a captain in Morgan working with two different head coaches who may have different philosophies or way that they see doing things. It's a really tricky one. I really think that they have to, if they're going to split these things, and that could possibly happen after the 2019 World Cup when Bayliss does go. But I think to do it beforehand might actually muddy things a bit more than actually solve things.
Sometimes simple is best, isn't it?
Well, I think so.
I'm just looking at the William Hill website here, and they've got a market for the next permanent England coach, and that's in Test cricket. So it's basically after Mr. Bayliss moves on in 2019 or sooner potentially. And the leaders in this market are Paul Collingwood's 4-1. 5-1 is Paul Farbrace. Justin Langer is 7-1. Otis Gibson, the former bowling coach and now current South African coach, is 8-1. Jason Gillespie coming back to Sussex is 10s. Mark Robinson, the former Sussex and current England women's coach, is 10s. And Chris Silverwood, Mickey Arthur, Tom Moody, all 12s. Mick Newell, Stephen Fleming, 14s, and the rest are 16-1 or bigger. Interesting that Paul Collingwood is the favourite in that market, isn't it? Because he has been very much an underling in the coaching structure for England so far, but obviously somebody that William Hill and other people are appreciating as highly valued by the ECB.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gambler myself, but that obviously suggests that people fancy Paul Collingwood for the role. I'm surprised to hear that Chris Silverwood is out there, sort of in the sort of chasing pack, if you're looking at it that way, because his appointment as England bowling coach, I'm sure he has many virtues as a bowling coach, but I do believe that it was made with one eye potentially down the line for the top job because of his success with Essex.
And his success with Essex was predominantly in the 4-day stuff, wasn't it?
Exactly, exactly that. And Otis Gibson is an interesting shout as well because he moved on from England because of his aspirations to become a head coach. Whether at the end of the 2019 World Cup, when South Africa have inevitably been knocked out in the semi-finals, maybe there will be regime change there. So who knows? But I mean, we're still a little way away. I don't anticipate a big change. If Bayliss' pitch for a new T20 coach comes in, I think that's going to buy him a bit more time with the Test and one day side, certainly up to the World Cup. I really can't see it changing before then. And I think the big test for England is going to be this winter in Sri Lanka. I think that's where he could come under the most pressure in Test cricket because they'll be in subcontinent again. There'll be spinning conditions. If Rashid won't be playing now because he's playing first class cricket, he's not playing first class cricket. It could be Moeen, but his bowling has obviously massively struggled over the winter. You're looking at an unproven Jack Leach and whether they would look to get him into the Test side early this summer. That's going to be the big test, and that could be what changes things. If England suffer a heavy defeat in Sri Lanka, that could change things for Bayliss, but I just don't see it at the moment.
I think Paul Farbrace is interesting as second favourite at 5-1 because obviously he came to Yorkshire after a dodgy stint at Kent where he found it difficult, but there were a lot of political rumblings at the county at the time and financial constraints. But he came to Yorkshire very much because he wanted to be second in command. He wanted to be shielded by somebody above him. He wanted to coach people in the nets. He wanted to enjoy the coaching side of things and be the second in command. Obviously, he he left Yorkshire to then take the reins at Sri Lanka, but then is second in command with England. I think he likes that role of being the lieutenant kind of thing, being the guy that's there, possibly a bit closer to the players, working in the nets with them day to day, but not having the complete spotlight of responsibility on him.
Yep, and no, you're dead right. He's a real people person. I think he loves being at the coalface, as you say, in the nets, throwdowns. He's a big one for pumping players' tyres up, really filling them with positive energy. And you see that when you watch England training. He really is. He's very vocal, and he keeps the guys sort of upbeat.
Richard Pyro once told me a story, Ali, of being at Yorkshire, and he couldn't buy a run. He was really struggling with the bat. He didn't know how to hit it out the middle. It just wasn't working for him at all. He said he spent a 20-minute net session with Paul Firebrace, who was in his ear all the way through it, saying how great he was. And he said he walked out at the end of it feeling like he was Brian Lara or Gary Sobers. It was just...
well, there you go.
Yeah, that's what Farby does to people.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, he's a guy he's a very infectious personality, and he's a guy that's full of energy. But we have to wonder whether he would want it, because not just for the scrutiny of being the number one in charge, but at the same time he will have come off the back of sort of 4.5 years of being on the England treadmill himself. He's often getting county offers. But counties do want Firebrace to come back to county cricket at some point, and I think he will. And it might be that England decide that they want a sort of slightly fresher voice when Bayliss departs as well. I'd be surprised if Firebrace steps up. As you say, it might not be his personal ambition, and also it might just be time for a proper change by then. But we're looking very far in the future here. There's a looming one-day series against New Zealand that we have to fret about.
There's a lot of unknowns in the betting world as well as the England coaching world. But I guess one of the potentials for Firebrace, Andrew Gale is under a little bit of pressure at Yorkshire. I have a massive amount of time for Andrew Gale. I think he sweats Yorkshire. He's just passionate about the club, and I really do hope he's successful at Headingley. But if he's not, and Yorkshire decide to make a change there, then Firebrace would be, I'm sure, one of their first choices.
Yeah, and Surrey have come in for him before, and I think Worcestershire was sort of sounding him out before appointing Kevin Sharp. As I say, he's not short of offers in county cricket, and I imagine they will continue to come in for him, and like everyone else at the moment on the international treadmill, is that he may decide that 4 years is enough, and he wants to spend more time at home. And so it'd be interesting to see how it goes.
If I was to give you a mythical £10, as you know, I'd never give you a £10 note. If I was to give you a mythical £10 to stake on one of those candidates, then that I've just read out there in the betting, who would you plump for now? If you were to have a bet now on the next permanent England Test match coach, Ali Martin, where would your £10 go?
Well, I think, given the odds that you listed out to me, I would be going for Chris Silverwood.
Chris Silverwood at 12 to 1 then for Ali Martin.
So I'm not a punter, so if I'm going to do it, I want a good return.
I can see that, and he's going to basically be able to bed in with England with the bowling coaching role, and he'll be there or thereabouts when it comes to the section. He'll certainly be in the final four, I think, when they're coming to make a decision on that. Ali, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. It seems an age since we spoke. A lot has happened since. I'm glad you survived Australia, and you've come back unscathed, even if England's Test record didn't. But it's been good to talk to you this week.
Cracking. Cheers. Thanks for having me, James.
It's that Badger style.
Been a cracking week this week on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Hope you've enjoyed the listen. Thank you very much to Ali Martin of The Guardian and to James Middlebrook for his contribution this week. Good luck to him as he rises through the ranks as an umpire. Join us again next week for another edition of the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast.
It's that Badger style.